What's up, guys? Welcome to Reddit Story Dose. Today we've got 5 stories for you, and trust me, these stories are absolutely insane. Sit back, relax, and let's get into it. From prorevenge. Teacher humiliated my dyslexic son in front of the class, she lost her tenure. My son has dyslexia. He was diagnosed at age 7, and since then, he has worked harder than any kid I know. Every single night after school, while other kids are outside riding bikes or playing video games, my boy sits at the kitchen table with his headphones on, listening to his assignments being read back to him, mouthing the words along, trying to make the letters stay still on the page. He uses audiobooks, speech-to-text software, and has an IEP that guarantees him accommodations in school. We fought hard for that IEP. Hours of testing, meetings with specialists, sitting across from administrators who kept saying, "Let's wait and see." We weren't waiting anymore. We got it in writing, signed, legally binding. His 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Brennan, decided those accommodations were coddling. The first incident happened in October. My son was using his approved tablet to take notes during a social studies lesson. It's right there in his IEP, assistive technology for note-taking and reading assignments. He'd been using it since 2nd grade without a single issue. Mrs. Brennan walked over to his desk, picked up the tablet, and held it in the air for the whole class to see. "Real students use pencils," she said. "You're not going to learn anything staring at a screen." 23 kids watched my son's face go red. He told me later he didn't even try to argue. He just sat there with a blank piece of paper for the rest of the period, pretending to write, unable to read back a single word of what he'd scribbled. He came home in tears. Not the loud, dramatic kind. The quiet kind, where he just sat on the edge of his bed and said, "Mom, am I dumb?" That question almost broke me. I sat next to him and wrapped my arm around his shoulders and told him what I've told him 100 times, that his brain just works differently, and differently is not less. But I could feel him shaking, and I knew something had cracked inside his confidence that I couldn't fix with a hug. I emailed Mrs. Brennan that night. I was calm, professional. I attached a copy of the IEP, highlighted the relevant sections, and reminded her that these accommodations were not optional. They were legally mandated. She replied the next morning in 3 sentences. She said she appreciated my concern, but she believed in holding all students to the same standard. She said she had 20 years of experience and knew what was best for her classroom. She did not mention the IEP once. I almost went to the principal right then, but I told myself to give it one more chance. Maybe she just needed the reminder. Maybe she'd course correct. She didn't. The second incident was worse. Much worse. During a reading exercise, she called on my son to read a passage aloud. Out loud. In front of everyone. Reading aloud is one of his biggest challenges. The letters jumble, the words blur together, and the pressure of people listening makes it 10 times harder. He knows this. We know this. His IEP specifically notes that oral reading should not be required unless he volunteers. He tried. God, he tried. I found this out later and it still makes my chest tight to think about. He stood up and held the book and started sounding out the first sentence, stumbling over words that any other 4th grader could breeze through. The class went silent, not the supportive kind of silent. The uncomfortable, shifting in seats, looking at each other kind of silent. And Mrs. Brennan just stood there, arms crossed. She let him struggle for 2 full minutes. 2 minutes of a 9-year-old drowning in front of his peers. Then she said it. Maybe if you practiced more instead of relying on machines, you'd be able to read like everyone else. My son didn't tell me about that one. He buried it, carried it around for a week like a stone in his pocket. His friend Jake told his mother, and Jake's mother called me on a Tuesday evening. Her voice was careful, the way people sound when they're delivering news they know will hurt. "I don't want to overstep," she started, and then she told me everything Jake had described. The silence. The staring. The comment. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in my car in the garage for 10 minutes with my hands on the steering wheel, shaking. I went nuclear. Not publicly. Not on social media, not screaming in the school office. Strategically. I filed a formal complaint with the school district the next day. I documented both incidents in detail, dates, times, what was said, who was present. I cited the specific sections of the IEP that had been violated and referenced the Americans with Disabilities Act. I included written statements from my son, from Jake, and from 3 other parents whose children had witnessed the incidents. I had each one of those parents write their statement independently, and they all matched. But I didn't stop there. Something in my gut told me this wasn't the first time. So I submitted a public records request for Mrs. Brennan's complete history of accommodations compliance and any related parent complaints. What I found was damning. She had received 4 previous complaints from other parents about refusing to honor IEP accommodations. 4 families before me had sat where I was sitting, furious and heartbroken, watching their kids come home crushed. And each time, the school had done the same thing. Issued a verbal warning, put a note in her file, and moved on. No follow-up, no monitoring, no consequences. I compiled everything, my complaint, the witness statements, the records showing a clear pattern of behavior and administrative negligence, and filed a formal complaint with the Office for Civil Rights at the Department of Education. I also retained a disability rights attorney. A good one. The kind who answers your first email within an hour and says, "I've seen this before, and we're going to fix it." The investigation lasted 3 months. 3 months of interviews, document reviews, and meetings in rooms with fluorescent lighting and bad coffee. I won't pretend it wasn't stressful. There were days I wondered if I'd gone too far, if I was making things harder for my son. But then I'd remember his voice on the edge of his bed. "Mom, am I dumb?" And I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. The findings were clear. Mrs. Brennan had systematically violated students' legal right to accommodations, not just my son's, but at least 4 other children over a span of 6 years. The school district had failed to take adequate corrective action despite repeated complaints. They had known, and they had done nothing. Mrs. Brennan was placed on unpaid leave and ultimately lost her tenure. The school district was required to implement mandatory annual training for all teachers on IEP compliance and disability rights. The principal who had ignored the previous complaints and let the pattern continue was transferred to an administrative position with no student contact. My son is now in 5th grade. His new teacher, Mr. Aldridge, asked on the first day of school what tools each student liked to learn with. When my son held up his tablet, Mr. Aldridge smiled and said, "Cool, can you show me how that works?" Now he uses it as a teaching tool for the whole class. Last month, my son voluntarily read 3 sentences aloud during a group project. 3 sentences. He stumbled on one word, corrected himself, and kept going. Nobody laughed. Nobody stared. His group clapped when he finished, and he came home grinning so wide I thought his face would split. He is thriving. Nobody makes my kid feel stupid for being different. Okay, moving on. Boss called our new hire a stupid moron, so all 15 of us quit and he got fired. I want to tell you about the time my entire department quit on the same day and got our bully of a boss fired. This is not just petty revenge. This had millions of euros on the line. And honestly, even now, years later, my hands still get a little shaky when I think about how close we came to losing everything. I was 27, working as a machine operator who had moved into the quality and sales department. It was not a glamorous job, but I was proud of it. I had earned my way up from the shop floor, learned the technical standards inside and out, and gotten certified in ways that most people in my position never bother with. We were a team of 15 people, including 3 veterans with 25+ years of experience. Gunter, Hans, and Bridget. Those 3 had been with the company longer than some of our machines. They knew every client, every specification, every unwritten rule that kept the operation running. Together, we were tight. We covered for each other. We stayed late without being asked. We knew our stuff, and we were good at what we did. Then the company hired a new department boss. 27 years old, same as me, but with 0 experience in our field. None. He had never operated a machine, never sat through a client audit, never even read a quality manual as far as any of us could tell. He got the job because of connections. His uncle sat on the advisory board. Not competence. Connections. From day one, he was a nightmare. He would hover over your shoulder and question every keystroke. He would send emails at 11 at night asking why a report from 3 weeks ago used a slightly different font. He talked to us like we were children, slow children, and he made sure we knew he considered himself above every single one of us. Behind closed doors, away from upper management, the mask came off completely. He would call people into his office and berate them until their voices cracked. Gunter, a man with 28 years at the company, once came out of that office with his jaw clenched so tight I thought he was going to shatter his own teeth. "One more time," he whispered to me as he sat back down. "One more time, and I walk." But the incident that broke everything happened on a Tuesday afternoon. The kind of afternoon where the office was quiet and everyone was just trying to get through the last 2 hours. I had been training a new hire. Her name was Lisa. She was 19, fresh out of vocational school, eager to learn, and doing great for someone who had been there only 2 weeks. She asked questions. She took notes. She double-checked her work. I remember thinking she reminded me of myself when I first started, nervous but hungry to prove herself. That afternoon, she filled out a form incorrectly. A minor clerical error. She had entered a batch number in the wrong field. It would have taken 30 seconds to fix. I had already noticed it and was walking over to show her the correction when he appeared. The boss saw the mistake. He did not pull her aside quietly. He did not ask me, her trainer, to handle it. He stood in the middle of the open plan office, in front of all 15 of us, and he screamed. His face went red. The veins on his neck stood out. He held the paper up like it was evidence in a murder trial. He called her, a 19-year-old girl on her second week, a stupid little moron. He said she was worthless. He said she would never amount to anything in this industry. He slammed the paper down on her desk and leaned in close enough that she flinched back in her chair. He threatened to make sure she never worked in the field again, that he would personally call every company in the region if he had to. Lisa did not say a word. Her lip trembled. Her eyes filled up, and the tears ran down her face silently while he kept going. She just sat there and took it, because what else could a 19-year-old do in that moment? The entire office was silent. Nobody typed. Nobody moved. I could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing above us. And something inside all of us snapped. Not just me. I saw it in Gunter's eyes. I saw Bridget slowly close her laptop. I saw Hans set down his coffee cup with a deliberate, careful motion, like he was afraid of what his hands might do if he was not careful. After the boss stormed back into his office, I went straight to Lisa's desk. She was wiping her face with her sleeve, trying to pretend she was fine. "I'm sorry," she whispered, like she had done something wrong. I put my hand on her shoulder and said, "You did nothing wrong. Not a single thing. This is on him." She nodded but could not look at me. That evening, Gunter called me. "I am done," he said. No anger in his voice. Just calm, cold certainty. "I have been here 28 years. I will not watch that happen to a child." I told him I felt the same way. We started calling the others. Over the next 48 hours, every single person in the department submitted their resignation. All 15 of us. We coordinated it. We timed it. One by one, the letters landed on his desk, each within minutes of the last. By Thursday morning, his department existed only on paper. Here is why this was devastating, and why upper management panicked the way they did. We had a major client audit scheduled in 3 weeks. This was not a casual review. It was a 15 to 20 million euro account, one of the largest the company held. The audit required complete documentation of our quality processes, traceability records, calibration logs, and compliance certifications. And I was the only person in the department, in the entire company, with the specific certifications required to represent us in that audit. Without me, the audit would fail. Without the team, there was no one to prepare the documentation. No one who understood the filing system Bridget had built over 2 decades. No one who could walk the auditors through our processes the way Hans could in his sleep. The boss suddenly realized, in one terrible morning, that he had driven away the only people who could save his career. He had the title. He had the office. But he had nothing else. The CEO got involved within days. He personally called each of us, one by one. I remember his voice on the phone, careful, measured, almost humble. "Tell me what happened," he said. And I did. I told him everything. About the micromanaging, the late-night emails, the private beratings, and what he did to Lisa. He was quiet for a long time after that. He met with the boss behind closed doors. I do not know exactly what was said, but someone told me later they could hear raised voices through the wall. And then the CEO made the right call. The boss was terminated immediately. No severance package. No transfer to another department. Gone. Every single employee was offered reinstatement with better terms, pay increases, additional leave, and a written commitment to workplace conduct standards. I was promoted to acting department head, a role I held for the next 2 years. We came back. We rolled up our sleeves. We worked weekends. And we passed the audit with flying colors. The bonus we received for saving the account was €700,000. I could have taken a larger share. Nobody would have questioned it. But that did not feel right. I split it equally among the entire team, including Lisa, the 19-year-old new hire who had only been with us for 2 weeks when everything fell apart. She cried again when I told her. Different tears this time. She is still with the company. Last I heard, she got promoted twice. The boss is not. And I hope wherever he is, he learned something. But honestly, I doubt it. Alright, next story. My parents spent my college fund on my sister's baby. Now I'm $70,000 in debt. I need to tell this story because my family thinks I should just get over it, and I need to know if my anger is justified. Because every single month, when that loan payment hits my bank account, I feel it all over again. This cold, heavy weight in my chest that never fully goes away. My grandparents set up education funds for both me and my older sister when we were born. My grandfather was a retired engineer, my grandmother a former school principal. Education was everything to them. They had scraped and saved for years, and when my sister and I came along, they sat down with a financial advisor and created 2 separate accounts, equal amounts, with clear conditions attached. Graduate high school, maintain at least a 3.0 GPA, and no pregnancies before completing your degree. Traditional? Maybe. But it was their money and their rules. They told us about the conditions when we were old enough to understand, and I remember my grandmother looking me in the eye and saying, "This is your future, sweetheart. We are giving you a head start. Don't waste it." I never planned to waste it. I worked hard in school. I kept my grades up. I stayed focused. That fund was my safety net, the thing that let me dream about going to a good university without the constant anxiety of how I would pay for it. My sister met all the conditions through high school. She was smart, popular, always the golden child in our family. She started college at a state university, majoring in communications. And in her sophomore year, she got pregnant. The father was a guy she had been dating for a few months. He disappeared almost immediately, blocked her number, transferred schools, the whole thing. She was devastated. Under the terms of the fund, her portion was supposed to be frozen and redirected to a general family trust. That was the agreement. That was what my grandparents had spelled out in writing. But my parents did not do that. Instead, they made a decision that changed my life without my knowledge or consent. They took money from my fund, the one with my name on it, and used it to cover my sister's medical expenses, her apartment deposit, baby supplies, and her remaining tuition so she could finish her degree. They did this over the course of 2 years. Quietly. Deliberately. They never once asked me. They never once told me. They justified it by saying family takes care of family and that the fund rules were outdated and unnecessarily punitive. I was 16 when it started. I had no idea. I was sitting in my bedroom studying for the SATs, dreaming about college campuses, while my parents were draining my future dry. I found out when I was 18 and ready to start college. I had gotten into my top choice school. I remember the excitement, the way my hands were almost shaking as I sat down at the computer to look into accessing my fund and start the paperwork. I pulled up the account and stared at the screen for what felt like a full minute before the number even registered. Out of what should have been about $90,000, there was less than $20,000 left. I thought it was an error. I genuinely thought something had gone wrong with the bank. I called my mom from my bedroom, and something in my voice must have given it away, because she came upstairs with my dad right behind her, and they both had this look on their faces. This guilty, rehearsed, we have been waiting for this moment look. My parents sat me down at the kitchen table and explained what they had done. My mom did most of the talking. She kept using phrases like, difficult situation, and, no other choice, and, your sister needed us. My dad sat there nodding, arms crossed, like he was backing her up but did not want to be the one saying the words. They expected me to understand. They expected me to be compassionate. They expected me to say, of course, family comes first. Instead, I felt like I had been robbed. Because I had been. I remember the silence after they finished talking. The kitchen clock ticking. The hum of the refrigerator. My mom reached across the table to touch my hand and I pulled it back like she had burned me. You spent $70,000 of my money, I said. My voice was flat. I did not yell. I was too shocked to yell. And you didn't even ask me. My mother started crying. She said they had done what any good parents would do. My father said I was being selfish, that my sister had been alone and scared and needed help. I said that was not the point. The point was that it was not their money to take. I confronted my sister the next day. I drove to her apartment and knocked on her door. She opened it with her daughter on her hip, and for a second, looking at my niece, I almost lost my nerve. But then I thought about that number on the screen, and I asked her straight. Did you know they took from my fund? She set the baby down in her playpen and turned to face me. Yes, she said quietly. I knew. And you were okay with that? She said she was sorry but that she would have done the same thing for me. I asked her if she was planning to pay it back. She looked at the floor and said she could not afford to. She was a single mother working part-time. She said she barely made rent some months. She said she hoped one day she could make it right. But hope does not pay tuition. I went to college anyway. I deferred for a semester, worked double shifts at a warehouse and a coffee shop to save what I could, and then I enrolled. I took out $70,000 in student loans. I worked 2 jobs throughout school, tutoring in the mornings and bartending on weekends. I ate ramen and peanut butter sandwiches. I skipped spring breaks and holidays because I was either working or studying. I graduated with honors and a mountain of debt that will take me 15 years to pay off. My grandparents found out what happened last year. My grandmother called me out of the blue one Sunday and asked how my loans were going. I think she expected me to say I had paid them off with the fund money. When I told her the truth, there was a long, terrible silence on the phone. Then I heard her voice crack. She said, "They did what?" They were livid. My grandfather called my father and I am told the conversation lasted 2 hours and ended with my grandfather hanging up mid-sentence. My grandparents had set those conditions for a reason, and my parents had overridden their wishes and drained my fund to cover for my sister's choices. My grandmother told my parents, to their faces, at a family dinner I was not present for, that they had stolen from me. She used that word, stolen, and she is not wrong. My parents still think I should forgive and move on. My mother sends me long texts about how family is more important than money. My father has simply stopped bringing it up, as if silence will make it disappear. My sister sends me birthday cards with little notes that say, "Love you, sis," as if nothing happened. And I sit here every month making loan payments for a debt I should never have had, watching that money leave my account and thinking about the life I was supposed to have. The one where I started my career without an anchor around my neck. Family takes care of family. Apparently, that only applies when you are not the one being taken care of. Alright, next story. Woman at the dog park demanded I give her my dog because her kids were attached. I take my golden retriever, Maple, to the dog park every Saturday morning. It's been our routine for almost 4 years now. Coffee in my travel mug, tennis ball in my jacket pocket, and Maple practically vibrating with excitement the second I pick up my keys. She knows the sound. She knows what Saturday means. Maple is the friendliest dog you will ever meet. She has never met a stranger. Kids, other dogs, squirrels she will never catch. She loves anything that breathes and gives her even a second of attention. Her tail could power a small wind turbine. 3 weeks ago, a woman showed up at the park with 2 children, roughly 5 and 7. No dog, no leash, just the 3 of them walking through the gate into the off-leash area. I noticed because it was a little unusual. Most people without dogs stick to the playground on the other side of the parking lot. But I did not think much of it. Some people just like watching dogs, and honestly, who could blame them? Maple, being Maple, spotted the kids within about 15 seconds and trotted straight over, tail going full helicopter. The younger one squealed and dropped to her knees, and Maple immediately rolled onto her back for belly rubs. The older boy was a little more cautious at first, but within a minute he was sitting cross-legged on the grass with Maple's head in his lap. They were in heaven. All three of them, really. Maple included. The woman walked over to me and we started chatting. She asked about Maple's breed, her age, her temperament. I told her Maple was a golden retriever, 6 years old, and had the personality of a greeting card, all love, all the time. She laughed at that. Normal conversation. I did not think anything of it. People ask me about Maple constantly. She is that kind of dog. They stayed for maybe 45 minutes. The kids hugged Maple before they left, and the little girl said, "Bye-bye, puppy," in that voice kids use that could melt concrete. Maple watched them walk to their car and then looked up at me like, "Where are my friends going?" I scratched her ears, threw the tennis ball, and we went on with our morning. The following Saturday, the same woman and kids were there again. This time they were already inside the park when we arrived. Maple recognized the kids immediately. Her ears perked up and she pulled on the leash so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. The second I unclipped her, she sprinted across the field and slid into the little girl like she was stealing home base. More playing, more petting, more joy. The boy had brought a stick this time and was throwing it for Maple. She was having the time of her life. I sat on the bench and the woman came over again. We talked for a bit, and then she asked me something that made my radar ping for the first time. She asked if I ever let Maple have playdates at other people's houses. Like, without me there. I said no. I said I appreciated how much her kids loved Maple, but she does not do sleepovers. I smiled when I said it, keeping it light. The woman nodded, but she had this look on her face, like she was filing that answer away rather than accepting it. I mentioned it to my buddy that night over beers. He said I was overthinking it. Maybe I was. I let it go. Last Saturday, she was waiting for me when I arrived. Not inside the park. In the parking lot. Leaning against her car, arms crossed, watching the entrance. The kids were in the backseat. Something about the whole picture felt off. Intentional. Staged. I got Maple out of the car and the woman walked up before I even had the leash on. She said she wanted to discuss something important. Her voice was different, serious, almost rehearsed. I assumed maybe her kids had developed allergies and she needed to tell me, or maybe she wanted to set up a more structured playdate at the park. Something reasonable. Instead, she said her children had become very attached to Maple and she thought it would be best if Maple went to live with them. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud because I was so sure she was joking. It was the kind of thing you laugh at because your brain cannot process it as a real sentence that a real person just said to you in a parking lot at 9 in the morning. She was not joking. Her expression did not change. Not even a little. She said her kids had been asking about Maple every single day since they first met her. She said they talked about her at dinner, drew pictures of her at school. She said they had already named her Princess. They had already set up a bed for her in their room. A pink dog bed from Target, she specified, as if that detail was supposed to make me feel something. She said that since I was just a single person with no children, Maple would have a better life with a real family. She actually used those words. A real family. I felt my stomach drop first, and then this slow, hot wave of anger rising up from my chest. I kept my voice as steady as I could. I told her that Maple was my dog. She had been my dog for 6 years. I got her as a puppy. I trained her, I walk her every day. I hold her when the thunder scares her, I pay her vet bills. I know which ear she likes scratched and which toy she sleeps with. She was not for sale, not for trade, and not for adoption. The woman's tone shifted like a switch had been flipped. The polite, friendly mask was gone. She said I was being selfish. She said her children were going to be heartbroken, and that would be my fault. She said she could see that Maple wanted to be with them, that the dog had chosen them. Then she said she would report me for animal neglect if I did not cooperate. I asked her to name one thing I was neglecting. One single thing. She could not. She just repeated that Maple deserved a family with children. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the effort of keeping my voice calm while this stranger stood in a parking lot and told me she deserved my dog. Maple was sitting at my feet, leaning against my leg like she always does, completely oblivious to the insanity happening above her head. I said I was leaving. I picked up Maple, put her in the car, got in, and started backing out. The woman stepped in front of my car, just walked right behind it and stood there. My heart was hammering. She leaned down to my window and said she was going to call the police. I put the car in park. I looked her dead in the eyes. I said please do. I said I would love to show them Maple's 6 years of vet records, her county registration, and her microchip, all in my name. Every single document. I said I would wait right here. Something shifted in her face. The confidence cracked. She stared at me for about 5 seconds that felt like 5 minutes, and then she moved. She just stepped aside without another word. I drove home with my hands still shaking on the steering wheel and Maple riding shotgun with her head out the window like nothing had happened. Because for her, nothing had. I have not been back to that dog park. I found a new one about 15 minutes farther out. It is smaller and the parking lot is gravel, but nobody there has tried to take my dog, so it is perfect. Maple is at home right now, sleeping on my couch with her head on the armrest and one paw hanging off the edge. She is completely unaware that a stranger spent 3 weeks building a case to take her away from me. She does not know that 2 kids somewhere have a pink dog bed with no dog in it. She has no idea. She remains blissfully, beautifully unbothered. And she is still my dog. She will always be my dog. This next one is wild. Someone demanded I give their kids a free PlayStation. When I said no, they said God would judge me. I was selling my old PlayStation on a local marketplace. Nothing dramatic, nothing special. I had upgraded a few months back and the old console had been sitting on my shelf ever since, still perfectly functional but completely ignored. Good condition, all cables included, 2 controllers, one black, one blue, both with decent grip left on the thumbsticks. I cleaned it up, took some photos in good lighting on my kitchen table, and posted it. Asking price, $200. Fair for what it was. Maybe even a little generous considering everything that came with it. Within an hour, I got a message. My phone buzzed while I was making dinner, and I figured it was someone asking if the price was negotiable or wanting to know if it had any scratches. Normal stuff. But when I opened it, there was no offer. No question. A demand. The message read, I see you have a PlayStation. My kids deserve it. They have been through a lot this year and I cannot afford to buy them one. Please give it to them. God is watching. I stared at my phone for a good 30 seconds. I even reread it to make sure I was not misunderstanding the tone. Nope. This person was not asking. They were telling me. As if I had some moral obligation to hand over my property to a complete stranger because they invoked God and the word deserve in the same sentence. I set my phone down, took a breath, and responded politely. I typed out something along the lines of, I'm really sorry to hear about your situation, and I hope things get better for your family. Unfortunately, I'm selling this, not giving it away. You might want to check with local charities. A lot of them do holiday gift drives this time of year and they sometimes have electronics. I thought that was reasonable. Compassionate, even. I hit send and went back to stirring my pasta. The response was immediate and aggressive. It came in so fast I wondered if they had it pre-written. They said I was greedy for selling something I clearly did not need anymore. They said if I already had a new system, what difference did it make to just let this one go? They said their children cried every day because they did not have a gaming system. Literal tears. Every single day. They said I had no heart and that people like me were what was wrong with the world. I could feel my jaw tightening as I read it. There is something uniquely frustrating about being insulted by someone who is simultaneously asking you for a favor. I wanted to fire back, but I kept it together. I simply repeated that the item was for sale at $200. They countered with $20. $20. For a PlayStation with 2 controllers and every cable it came with. I said no. They said $30. I said the price was $200. They said $50 and added a, that's my final offer, as if they were doing me some kind of favor. I stared at the ceiling for a moment, set my phone face down on the counter, and stopped responding. There was no version of this conversation that was going anywhere productive. Then came the guilt finale. A long, sprawling paragraph, the kind you have to scroll through, about how they were a single parent working 3 jobs. About how their kids had nothing. How the other children at school made fun of them. How Christmas was right around the corner and this would be the only gift they received. How if I had any decency, any shred of basic human compassion left in my soul, I would donate the PlayStation because it was just sitting in your house collecting dust anyway. They even threw in a line about how they would pray for me regardless of my decision, which somehow felt more aggressive than any of the insults. I sat there reading it and I will not lie, for about 5 seconds, I felt a pang of guilt. That is the thing about these messages. They are designed to make you feel like the villain in someone else's story. But then I looked around my apartment. I looked at my own stack of bills on the kitchen counter. I looked at my bank account balance, which was not exactly overflowing with generosity money. And I typed back the truth. I pointed out that it was not collecting dust. It was actively listed for sale, which is the opposite of collecting dust. And that I also have bills to pay. My rent does not care about anyone's feelings, mine included. Their final message arrived about 2 minutes later. I could almost hear the dramatic exhale through the screen. God will remember how you treated his children today. Enjoy your $200 in hell. I read it twice. Then I laughed. Not a chuckle. A real laugh. The kind that catches you off guard in your own kitchen at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night. I screenshotted it and sent it to my best friend, who responded with a string of crying laughing emojis and the words, "These people are unreal." I sold the PlayStation the next day to a college student named Marcus who drove 20 minutes to my place, handed me $200 in cash, tested the controllers for about 30 seconds, nodded, and said, "Awesome, thank you so much." That was it. No guilt trips. No invocations of the divine. No tears. Just a fair transaction between 2 normal human beings. He tucked the console under his arm, shook my hand, and left. The whole exchange took less than 10 minutes. It was beautiful in its simplicity. I figured that was the end of it. A weird encounter, a good story for parties, nothing more. 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed with a marketplace notification. I opened it and felt my eyebrows climb halfway up my forehead. It was the same person. Same profile. Same picture. Asking, and I swear I am not making this up, if I had any other electronics I would be willing to donate. Not sell. Donate. As if our previous conversation had ended on friendly terms. As if they had not condemned me to eternal hellfire over a gaming console 14 days earlier. I did not respond, but I did something better. I pulled up the screenshots from our original conversation, blurred out their profile picture because I am not a complete monster, and posted them in the local buy and sell group with a simple caption. Just a heads up, folks. Within an hour, the comments started rolling in, and that is when I realized I was not special. Turns out, this person had sent nearly identical messages to over a dozen sellers in our area. Same script, same guilt trip, same, God is watching, sign off. Other people started posting their own screenshots, and they were almost word-for-word copies. The single parent, the 3 jobs, the crying children, the Christmas deadline, all of it, templated and deployed like some kind of spiritual spam campaign. The group had a field day. Someone even made a bingo card. God may be watching, but apparently, so is everyone on the marketplace.